A king drinks bull's blood and dies as screaming warriors on horseback thunder toward his capital. This is 696 BC in central Turkey, and King Midas, yes, that Midas, though he never turned anything to gold, has just taken his own life rather than face capture by the Cimmerians, nomadic raiders, who've already burned half of Anatolia. But this isn't where the Phrygian story begins. Rewind 500 years earlier, around 1200 BC, when the entire Bronze Age world is collapsing. Great empires are falling like dominoes, the Hittites, the Mycenaeans, entire civilizations erased in a generation. In the chaos, a tough Indo-European people living in the rugged mountains of the Balkans, in what's now Bulgaria and Thrace, decide it's time to move. They're called the Phrygians, and they're about to cross from Europe into Asia and build one of the most fascinating kingdoms of the ancient world. Archaeological digs at Gordion, their future capital, show exactly when they arrived. Around 1100 BC, the pottery suddenly changes. Gone are the fancy wheel-made Hittite ceramics, replaced by hand-burnished dark vessels with geometric scratches, the calling card of Balkan migrants. These aren't just random settlers, they're bringing iron technology with them, one of the cutting-edge innovations of the age. Their metalwork, simple knives, horse bits, distinctive bow-shaped pins, shows they're related to Thracian tribes back across the Hellespont, that narrow strait separating Europe from Asia. Picture this. Not a single massive invasion, but waves of families crossing over decades, bringing livestock, household goods, and most importantly, horses, golden retrievers of the ancient world. No, war horses that give these newcomers a military edge over anyone already living in Anatolia. The Phrygians don't just wander randomly into Anatolia, they head straight for the Sangarius River Valley, a lush agricultural corridor cutting through the central Anatolian plateau. Why here? Because it looks like home. The terrain resembles their Balkan mountains, the river provides water and defense, and most importantly, it's sitting on the major east-west trade route that will later become Persia's royal road. Smart move. They establish their capital at Gordion, right where the Sangarius meets its tributaries, commanding the crossroads of continental trade. The earliest Phrygian buildings at Gordion show careful planning. Organized residential areas, storage facilities, and defensive walls. They're building with stone foundations and mud brick walls, adapting their Balkan architectural techniques to local materials. But Gordion isn't the only settlement. Phrygian communities pop up across central and western Anatolia, following river valleys and highland plateaus. Some sites are brand new, built on previously empty land. Others are old Hittite centers the Phrygians occupy and rebuild after decades of abandonment. The pattern is clear. They prefer elevated, defensible positions, fortified hilltops that can protect both people and livestock. These aren't just farmers, they're pastoralists too, needing space for sheep, goats, and cattle. The fortifications they build enhance natural defenses with constructed walls and ditches, creating strongholds that reflect their mixed agricultural and herding economy. And here's where it gets interesting. The Phrygians aren't alone in Anatolia. When the Phrygians arrive, they encounter a patchwork of survivors from the Bronze Age collapse. There are remnants of Hittite civilization, people who remember the old empire but now live in isolated pockets, politically fragmented but culturally sophisticated. There are the Hatti, the original pre-Indo-European inhabitants of central Anatolia, still maintaining their settlements in marginal areas the big powers ignored. And there are other local groups scratching out existence in a world that's just fallen apart. The Phrygians' relationship with these people varies wildly. Sometimes it's violent conquest, sometimes it's peaceful accommodation. At sites like Boğazköy, the old Hittite capital, archaeology shows a gradual transition, Phrygian pottery appearing alongside continuing Hittite traditions, suggesting coexistence rather than massacre. But in western Anatolia, things get even more complicated. Greek settlers are simultaneously establishing colonies along the Aegean coast, creating a three-way cultural collision: Phrygians, indigenous Anatolians, and Greeks, all competing for territory and resources. Excavations in the Hermus River Valley show mixed pottery assemblages, Phrygian, Greek, and local Anatolian pieces jumbled together, evidence of extensive trade, intermarriage, and cultural exchange. The Phrygians prove remarkably effective at warfare in this chaotic environment. Unlike the Bronze Age powers that relied on chariot warfare and professional armies, the Phrygians employ mounted warriors and flexible infantry that can operate in Anatolia's varied terrain. Their iron weapons give them a technological edge over populations still using bronze, and their cavalry tactics, learned on the steppes of the Balkans, proved devastating in Anatolian highlands. Archaeological evidence shows iron spearheads, swords, and arrowheads at Phrygian sites, along with horse equipment that indicates cavalry formed the backbone of their military power. But the Phrygians aren't just warriors, they're builders and traders too. The economy they establish combines agriculture in the fertile river valleys with pastoralism on the highland plateaus. Archaeological remains show agricultural tools, grain storage facilities, and animal bones from sheep, goats, and cattle. They're growing crops and herding flocks, creating the agricultural surplus necessary to support towns and eventually cities. Craft production becomes increasingly important. The distinctive Phrygian pottery tradition evolves from its Balkan origins, incorporating local Anatolian influences. What starts as simple hand-burnished vessels becomes more sophisticated, eventually including wheel-thrown ceramics produced in specialized workshops. Metalwork expands beyond basic iron tools to include bronze objects and increasingly elaborate items that will become hallmarks of Phrygian culture. And the trade networks develop rapidly. Gordion's strategic position on major communication routes facilitates exchange with both eastern and western neighbors. Archaeologists have found imported Greek pottery and other foreign goods at Gordion, indicating trade relationships extending to the Aegean coast, northern Syria, and other regions of Anatolia. The Phrygians aren't isolated, they're connected to the broader ancient world through commerce. Religious practices show both continuity with Balkan origins and adaptation to Anatolian conditions. Burial practices include both cremation and inhumation, with grave goods reflecting social status. Some sites include horse burials, indicating these animals held religious significance beyond their practical military and economic value. The Phrygians are bringing their gods with them, but also learning to worship in ways their new neighbors understand. But scattered settlements and tribal leadership can only take you so far. Around 950 BC, something changes at Gordion, something big. As the archaeological evidence is unmistakable, around 950 BC, Gordion transforms from a large settlement into a royal capital. Massive new buildings appear, constructed on a scale and with a sophistication that screams centralized authority. The transition from tribal chieftains to kings happens gradually through strategic marriages, military alliances, and control over increasingly lucrative trade networks. Someone, probably a powerful local chief, is consolidating power, and the physical evidence is spectacular. The earliest identifiable royal structure at Gordion is Building A, a massive megaron-style hall measuring about 115 feet long and 50 feet wide. This isn't just a house, it's a palace and administrative center combined. Thick stone foundations support mud brick walls decorated with painted geometric patterns in red, black, and white. Inside, multiple rooms surround a central hearth with specialized areas for food preparation, storage, and ceremonial activities. And here's the crucial part. Archaeologists found clay tablets and seal impressions documenting sophisticated record-keeping systems, tracking tribute payments, trade transactions, and military obligations across the growing kingdom. This is bureaucracy, ancient style, The consolidation of royal power requires administrative hierarchies that can govern territories spanning hundreds of kilometers. Excavations at secondary Phrygian centers show standardized architectural forms and material culture, suggesting centralized planning. Local governors, probably drawn from established tribal elites, administer these centers under royal oversight, implementing uniform legal codes and taxation systems. But military organization forms the backbone of early Phrygian royal power. Kings maintain professional warrior bands supplemented by tribal levies during major campaigns. Iron weapons discovered in royal contexts include elaborately decorated swords with silver inlaid hilts and bronze spearheads featuring intricate geometric patterns, symbols of royal authority. The standardization of military equipment indicates centralized production facilities under royal control, producing weapons, armor, and horse equipment for professional soldiers and local militias alike. Gordion isn't just strategically located, it's perfectly positioned to become rich. The site sits at the intersection of major trade routes connecting the Aegean coast with central Anatolia and the Black Sea region, ideal for controlling commercial traffic and collecting customs revenues. The Sangarius River provides both defensive advantages and transportation links, while the surrounding fertile plains produce the agricultural surplus necessary to maintain a royal court and standing army. Archaeological investigations reveal systematic expansion during the 9th century BC, planned residential districts, craft quarters, and defensive installations constructed according to unified architectural principles. The lower city extends across about 250 acres, containing densely packed houses built around courtyards using standardized construction techniques. These residential areas are organized into distinct neighborhoods, possibly reflecting occupational specializations or ethnic divisions within the growing urban population. The Citadel Mound undergoes massive reconstruction during this period. Earlier structures are demolished to make way for monumental royal buildings constructed on artificial terraces carved into the hillside. The engineering required demonstrates sophisticated technical knowledge, advanced drainage systems, retaining walls and foundations designed to support multi-story structures on unstable soil. Timber framework construction using massive oak and pine beams secured with bronze fittings allows for the creation of large interior spaces suitable for royal audiences and ceremonial gatherings. Trade routes converging at Gordion carry goods from across the known world, transforming the Phrygian capital into a major commercial hub rivaling contemporary centers in Mesopotamia and the Levant. Merchants traveling the east-west corridor stop at Gordion to trade, rest, and resupply, paying taxes and customs duties that fill royal treasuries. Archaeological evidence includes imported pottery from Greek workshops, ivory carvings from Syria, amber beads from the Baltic region, and precious metals from Anatolia's mineral-rich highlands. Imagine the scene: caravans arriving daily, exotic goods changing hands, customs officials tallying imports, all generating wealth that flows into royal coffers. The Phrygians are getting rich, and their material culture reflects it. The development of distinctive Phrygian pottery during this period reflects indigenous creativity and selective adoption of foreign influences encountered through expanding trade networks. Phrygian pottery evolves from handmade traditions to wheel-thrown vessels produced in specialized workshops under royal patronage. The characteristic Phrygian pottery features burnished surfaces decorated with geometric patterns executed in white paint on dark backgrounds, creating striking visual effects that distinguish Phrygian ceramics from contemporary productions elsewhere in Anatolia. Metalwork reaches new levels of sophistication under royal sponsorship. Bronze and iron objects display technical excellence and artistic refinement, reflecting the growing wealth and cultural confidence of the Phrygian kingdom. Bronze vessels found in royal contexts include elaborate cauldrons decorated with protom attachments, decorative elements shaped like lions, bulls, and mythological creatures demonstrating familiarity with artistic traditions from across the Eastern Mediterranean. Iron advances beyond simple tools and weapons to include decorative objects and architectural fittings showcasing Phrygian craftsmen's technical mastery. The famous Phrygian fibulae, bronze pins used to fasten clothing, evolved during this period from simple functional items to elaborate status symbols decorated with intricate geometric patterns and figural representations. These objects, found throughout Phrygian territories, serve as markers of cultural identity and social rank, with the most elaborate examples reserved for royal and aristocratic use. The standardization of fibulae types across the kingdom suggests centralized production and distribution systems, reinforcing political unity through shared material culture. Architectural developments at Gordion and other major Phrygian centers established distinctive building traditions that influence Anatolian construction techniques for centuries. The characteristic Phrygian megaron combines elements of Balkan timber frame construction with Anatolian stone masonry, creating structures both monumentally impressive and well adapted to local environmental conditions. Roofing systems using overlapping clay tiles provide effective weather protection while allowing construction of larger interior spaces than earlier architectural traditions permitted. But pottery and architecture aren't what make the Phrygians truly distinctive, it's their religion. Religious practices undergo significant transformation as Phrygian society becomes increasingly centralized and urbanized. The adoption of Cybele, the great mother goddess, as the primary royal deity represents both a continuation of ancient Anatolian religious traditions and a political innovation legitimizing Phrygian rule over indigenous populations. Cybele's cult, centered on fertility, protection, and royal authority, provides ideological support for monarchical institutions, while incorporating elements appealing to diverse ethnic groups within the expanding kingdom. Archaeological evidence for Cybele worship includes votive offerings, cult statues, and specialized ritual vessels found at religious sites throughout Phrygian territory. The goddess is typically depicted as a mature woman flanked by lions, emphasizing her role as mistress of wild animals and protector of cities. Royal patronage of Cybele's cult includes construction of elaborate temples and sponsorship of religious festivals, bringing together populations from across the kingdom in displays of unity and devotion. The integration of Cybele worship with royal ideology creates powerful symbolic associations, strengthening monarchical authority. Kings present themselves as chosen servants of the goddess, deriving their right to rule from divine selection rather than purely military or tribal considerations. This religious legitimation proves particularly important in governing diverse populations including indigenous Anatolians, immigrant Phrygians, and various other ethnic groups attracted to the growing prosperity of Phrygian territories. Mystery initiations associated with Cybele's cult provide additional mechanisms for social integration and political control. These secret ceremonies, conducted in underground chambers and sacred groves, create bonds of shared religious experience transcending ethnic and regional divisions. Royal participation in these mysteries demonstrates the king's spiritual authority while creating networks of initiated supporters throughout the kingdom. The development of sacred kingship concepts influences royal ceremonial practices and court culture at Gordion. Evidence suggests Phrygian kings adopt elaborate ritual protocols emphasizing their special relationship with divine powers. Royal regalia found in burial contexts includes gold diadems, ceremonial weapons, and ritual vessels serving as symbols of divine favor and temporal authority. But all this prosperity and religious sophistication is about to reach its peak under one man, a king who'll become legendary, though not for the reasons Greek myths suggest. Around 740 BC, a new king ascends the Phrygian throne, Midas. Not the fairy tale figure who turned everything to gold, that's Greek mythology written centuries later. The real Midas is a shrewd politician, successful military commander, and patron of the arts, whose roughly 30-year reign brings unprecedented wealth and cultural achievement to the Phrygian realm. Assyrian cuneiform records provide the most reliable contemporary evidence for Midas's existence. The annals of Sargon II of Assyria, carved on stone reliefs and clay tablets discovered at Khorsabad and Nineveh, repeatedly mention Mita of Mushki as a significant adversary and later diplomatic partner. These sources describe him ruling vast territories in central and western Anatolia, commanding substantial military forces and controlling trade networks extending from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean coast. The discrepancy between historical and mythological portrayals reflects different purposes. Assyrian scribes document Midas as a practical political reality, requiring military response and diplomatic engagement, recording his tribute payments, territorial boundaries, and alliance agreements with clinical precision. Greek authors writing centuries later, drawing on oral traditions rather than contemporary sources, transform the historical king into a cautionary tale about excessive wealth and divine punishment for human hubris. Archaeological evidence from Gordion supports the Assyrian portrayal of Midas as a powerful and wealthy ruler. Excavations in the citadel area reveal massive construction projects undertaken during his reign, including the famous Megaron tomb, a royal audience hall measuring 125 feet in length, featuring sophisticated architectural elements, demonstrating both technical mastery and enormous financial resources. The building's timber framework, constructed from carefully selected and precisely cut oak beams, supports a roof system creating an interior space capable of accommodating hundreds of people for royal ceremonies and diplomatic receptions. The walls are decorated with geometric patterns executed in multiple colors, including expensive pigments imported from distant regions. Chemical analysis of paint samples identifies lapis lazuli blue from Afghanistan, cinnabar red from Spain, and various organic dyes requiring extensive trade networks to obtain. The floor consists of carefully fitted stone slabs covered with woolen carpets, whose fragmentary remains show intricate patterns woven with gold and silver threads. This is wealth on a scale that makes neighboring kingdoms nervous. Midas's territorial expansion brings the Phrygian kingdom into direct conflict with Assyrian ambitions in Anatolia. Sargon II's military campaigns of 718 and 714 BC specifically target Phrygian territories, seeking to establish Assyrian control over the lucrative trade routes Midas has dominated for decades. The Assyrian king's inscriptions describe fierce battles fought in the mountainous regions of central Anatolia, where Phrygian forces utilize their knowledge of local terrain to conduct effective guerrilla warfare against the better equipped but less mobile Assyrian army. Picture Assyrian columns marching through narrow mountain passes, suddenly ambushed by Phrygian cavalry appearing from nowhere, striking fast, then vanishing into the hills. The siege of Carchemish in 717 BC marks a crucial turning point in Phrygian-Assyrian relations. Midas provides military support to the Neo-Hittite rulers of Carchemish, supplying troops and weapons, attempting to maintain a buffer state between Phrygian territory and expanding Assyrian control. When Sargon's forces finally capture the city after a prolonged siege, they discover Phrygian weapons, armor, and even Phrygian soldiers among the defenders, concrete evidence of Midas's anti-Assyrian activities. The aftermath of Carchemish's fall forces Midas to reconsider his confrontational approach toward Assyria. Assyrian military superiority, demonstrated through successful siege warfare and disciplined infantry formations, convinces the Phrygian king that direct military opposition is unsustainable. Archaeological evidence from this period shows increased fortification activities at Gordion, and other major Phrygian centers, suggesting Midas prepares for potential Assyrian invasion while simultaneously seeking diplomatic solutions. The transformation from military adversary to diplomatic partner occurs gradually over several years of careful negotiation. Assyrian records document the exchange of ambassadors between Sargon's court at Khorsabad and Midas's palace at Gordion, with both rulers recognizing the mutual benefits of peaceful coexistence. The Phrygian kingdom's strategic position astride major trade routes makes it a valuable ally for Assyrian commercial interests, while Assyrian military protection offers Midas security against other regional threats. But this diplomatic dance is delicate, and one wrong move could reignite war. The formal tribute agreement established between Midas and Sargon around 710 BC represents a masterpiece of ancient diplomacy satisfying both parties' essential interests. Midas agrees to pay annual tribute consisting of precious metals, luxury goods, and specialized craftsmen while maintaining internal autonomy and territorial integrity. Tribute payments, carefully recorded in Assyrian administrative documents, include substantial quantities of silver, gold, and copper, along with finished products, showcasing Phrygian artistic and technical capabilities. Archaeological evidence for these tribute payments has been discovered at both Gordian and Assyrian sites. Inventory lists from Sargon's palace at Khorsabad mention Phrygian metalwork, textiles, and wooden furniture among the royal treasures, while excavations at Gordion reveal production facilities specifically designed to manufacture goods suitable for tribute payments. These workshops, located in the lower city beneath the citadel, produce standardized bronze vessels, decorated weapons, and luxury textiles, meeting Assyrian quality specifications, while maintaining distinctively Phrygian artistic characteristics. The economic prosperity characterizing Midas's reign derives primarily from the Phrygian kingdom's strategic control over transcontinental trade networks. The ancient route connecting Europe with Asia passes directly through Phrygian territory, bringing merchants from Greek colonies on the Aegean coast into contact with traders from Mesopotamia, Syria, and the Iranian plateau. Gordion's position at the center of this commercial network allows Midas to collect customs duties, provide essential services to traveling merchants, and participate directly in long-distance trade ventures. The metals trade proves particularly lucrative for the Phrygian economy during this period. Anatolia's mineral-rich highlands contain substantial deposits of copper, silver, and iron ore, increasingly in demand throughout the eastern Mediterranean world. Phrygian merchants operating under royal licenses and protection established trading posts from the Black Sea coast to northern Syria, creating commercial networks generating enormous profits for the royal treasury and private entrepreneurs alike. Archaeological evidence from Gordion demonstrates the scale and sophistication of metalwork operations during Midas's reign. Excavations in the craft quarters reveal multiple bronze-working facilities equipped with advanced furnaces capable of reaching temperatures necessary for complex alloy production. Imagine the scene: workshops glowing with furnace light, craftsmen pouring molten bronze into intricate molds, hammering finished pieces into shape, all producing goods that will travel thousands of miles to markets across the known world. Workshops produce not only utilitarian items like tools and weapons, but also luxury goods including decorated vessels, jewelry, and religious objects traded throughout the ancient world. The famous Phrygian bronzes discovered at sites across the Mediterranean region date primarily to Midas's reign, reflecting both the technical excellence of Phrygian craftsmen and the extensive reach of their commercial networks. These objects, including elaborate cauldrons decorated with griffin and lion protomes, demonstrate sophisticated casting techniques and artistic sensibilities, influencing metalwork traditions from Greece to Mesopotamia. Chemical analysis of bronze compositions reveals standardized alloy recipes, suggesting centralized quality control and technical training systems operating under royal supervision. Textile production represents another major source of Phrygian economic prosperity during this period. The kingdom's pastoral economy provides abundant wool from sheep and goats grazing on the Anatolian plateau, while trade connections supply exotic materials like silk from Central Asia and cotton from Syria. Phrygian weavers, many of whom are women working in household-based production units, create textiles renowned throughout the ancient world for their quality and distinctive decorative patterns. The discovery of textile production equipment at Gordion, including loom weights, spindle whirls, and dyeing vats, provides concrete evidence for large-scale cloth manufacture during Midas's reign. Chemical analysis of dye residues identifies expensive colorants including Tyrian purple from Mediterranean murex shells and indigo from distant regions, indicating Phrygian textile producers have access to the finest materials available in the ancient world. Cultural achievements during Midas's reign reflect both the kingdom's growing wealth and its increasingly sophisticated artistic traditions. The king's patronage of monumental architecture, decorative arts, and religious institutions creates a distinctive Phrygian cultural identity, influencing artistic development throughout Anatolia and beyond. Royal workshops at Gordion produced luxury goods, combining traditional Phrygian motifs with artistic influences absorbed through extensive trade contacts and diplomatic relations. And Midas isn't just building for his lifetime, he's planning for eternity. The construction of the famous Midas Mound tumulus, begun during the king's lifetime as his intended burial place, represents the pinnacle of Phrygian architectural and engineering achievement. This massive earthen mound, measuring 174 feet in height and nearly 1,000 feet in diameter, requires the movement of approximately 7 million cubic feet of soil and stone, representing one of the largest construction projects undertaken in the ancient world. Picture thousands of workers over years moving earth basket by basket, creating an artificial mountain visible for miles across the Anatolian plateau. The tomb's interior chamber, built from carefully fitted limestone blocks and covered with a complex timber roof system, contains burial goods reflecting both the king's enormous wealth and the sophisticated artistic traditions of his reign. Archaeological investigation of the Midas Mound reveals construction techniques demonstrating advanced engineering knowledge and organizational capabilities. The tomb chamber's walls are constructed using precisely cut ashlar masonry secured with bronze clamps and sealed with lead, creating a waterproof environment designed to preserve the royal burial for eternity. The timber roof structure, assembled from massive oak and cedar beams joined with elaborate bronze fittings, supports the enormous weight of the overlying earthen mound while maintaining structural integrity for over 2 millennia. The burial goods discovered within the Midas Mound provide unparalleled insight into the material culture and artistic achievements of Midas's reign. The tomb contains over 170 bronze vessels of various types, including elaborate serving sets, ceremonial cauldrons, and drinking cups demonstrating the technical mastery and artistic sophistication of Phrygian metalworkers. Many of these objects bear inscriptions in the Phrygian alphabet, providing valuable linguistic evidence while confirming the tomb's royal associations. Wooden furniture found in the burial chamber includes tables, chairs, and serving stands decorated with intricate inlay work featuring geometric patterns and stylized animal motifs. The preservation of organic materials within the tomb's sealed environment has allowed detailed analysis of Phrygian woodworking techniques, revealing sophisticated joinery methods and decorative treatments influencing furniture design throughout the eastern Mediterranean region. But Midas's greatest legacy isn't just objects, it's the artistic and cultural flowering his reign makes possible. The artistic innovations of Midas's reign extend beyond luxury goods to encompass architectural decoration, religious sculpture, and public monuments transforming the visual landscape of Phrygian cities. The famous rock-cut facades of Midas city, carved directly into cliff faces in the Phrygian highlands, demonstrate monumental sculpture techniques, creating impressive religious and commemorative monuments. These facades, decorated with geometric patterns and architectural elements carved in high relief, serve as focal points for religious ceremonies and expressions of royal power visible from great distances across the surrounding countryside. The development of distinctive Phrygian artistic styles during this period reflects both indigenous creativity and selective adoption of foreign influences encountered through diplomatic and commercial contacts. Phrygian artists absorb decorative motifs from Assyrian, Syrian, and Greek sources, while maintaining stylistic characteristics, creating recognizably Phrygian artistic products. This cultural synthesis produces art forms both internationally sophisticated and distinctively regional, contributing to the development of artistic traditions influencing Anatolian culture for centuries. Religious architecture flourishes under Midas's patronage, with major temple complexes constructed at Gordion and other important centers throughout the kingdom. These buildings, dedicated primarily to Cybele and other traditional Phrygian deities, feature elaborate decorative programs combining architectural sculpture with painted decoration and metalwork elements. The temples serve not only as religious centers but also as symbols of royal piety and cultural achievement, reinforcing the king's political authority while providing focal points for community identity and social cohesion. But in 696 BC, everything comes crashing down, not from Assyrian armies or Greek invasions, from something far more terrifying. Nomadic warriors from the steppes north of the Black Sea are coming, and they fight like nothing the Phrygians have ever encountered. Midas, facing the unstoppable advance of the Cimmerians and seeing his kingdom about to be destroyed, makes a final, desperate choice. He drinks bull's blood and dies rather than face capture. The golden age of Phrygia ends not with a coronation but with suicide and screaming horsemen torching the capital. The Cimmerians emerge from the Pontic steppes as a confederation of horse-riding tribes displaced by Scythian expansion from the east. Archaeological evidence from Cimmerian burials in southern Ukraine and the northern Caucasus reveals a warrior culture characterized by exceptional horsemanship, advanced metallurgy, and military tactics perfectly adapted to rapid movement across vast distances. Their weapons include composite bows capable of penetrating contemporary armor at ranges exceeding 600 feet, iron-tipped arrows designed for maximum penetration, and long cavalry swords giving mounted warriors decisive advantages over infantry formations. Picture warriors who live on horseback, who can shoot arrows at full gallop, who appear from nowhere and vanish before defenders can organize. Warfare as nightmare. The Cimmerian invasion of Anatolia begins around 714 BC with probing raids across the Caucasus Mountains, but the full-scale assault destroying Phrygian power doesn't commence until after 700 BC. The nomads' military strategy relies on coordinated attacks by multiple tribal groups operating independently, but sharing intelligence and coordinating their movements to maximize psychological impact while preventing effective defensive responses. Unlike conventional armies requiring supply lines and permanent bases, the Cimmerians travel with their families and herds, creating self-sufficient military communities capable of sustaining prolonged campaigns without external support. The speed of Cimmerian military operations catches Phrygian defenders completely unprepared for the scale and intensity of nomadic warfare. Traditional Phrygian military doctrine, developed through centuries of conflict with other sedentary states like Assyria and the Greek city-states, emphasizes fortified positions, disciplined infantry formations, and siege warfare techniques, proving utterly inadequate against enemies refusing to engage in conventional battles. The Cimmerians avoid direct assaults on major fortifications, instead striking at smaller settlements, trade routes, and agricultural areas, forming the economic foundation of Phrygian power. Archaeological excavations at Gordion reveal dramatic evidence of the destruction accompanying the Cimmerian invasions. Excavation teams uncovered thick destruction layers dating to approximately 695 BC, containing burned building debris, scattered human remains, and abandoned household goods, telling the story of sudden and violent attack. The famous Megaron II, Midas's great audience hall, shows clear signs of deliberate burning, with charred roof timbers collapsed onto floors littered with broken pottery and scattered bronze objects. The destruction layer at Gordion extends across virtually the entire lower city, indicating the Cimmerian attack isn't a brief raid, but a systematic assault designed to eliminate Phrygian power permanently. Chemical analysis of soil samples from this layer identifies traces of accelerants, suggesting the nomads deliberately set fires to ensure complete destruction of wooden structures. Human skeletal remains found within collapsed buildings show evidence of violent death, including arrow wounds and sword cuts, confirming the ferocity of the final assault. Similar destruction layers have been identified at other major Phrygian centers throughout central and western Anatolia. At Alishar-Hoyuk, excavations reveal evidence of burning and abandonment corresponding chronologically with the Gordian destruction. The site's defensive walls show signs of hasty repair attempts, suggesting inhabitants had warning of approaching danger, but lacked sufficient time or resources to mount effective resistance. Clay tablets found in the ruins contain fragmentary records of desperate attempts to organize defensive preparations and requests for military assistance that apparently went unanswered. The Cimmerian strategy of targeting economic infrastructure proves devastatingly effective against the Phrygian kingdom's trade-based prosperity. Nomadic raiders systematically attack merchant caravans, destroy bridges and road stations, and occupy strategic mountain passes controlling access to major trade routes. The disruption of commercial networks that had generated enormous wealth during Midas's reign creates cascading economic collapse, undermining the kingdom's ability to maintain military forces and administrative systems necessary for organized resistance. Archaeological evidence from rural Phrygian settlements reveals the broader impact of nomadic raids on agricultural production and population distribution. Excavations at small farming communities throughout the Sangarius River Valley uncover evidence of sudden abandonment during this period, with household goods left in place and storage facilities emptied hastily. Imagine farmers hearing rumors of approaching horsemen, grabbing what they can carry, fleeing to fortified centers, or abandoning the region entirely. The collapse of centralized authority following Midas's death creates additional vulnerabilities the Cimmerians exploit ruthlessly. Without effective royal leadership, regional governors and local commanders pursue independent survival strategies, often conflicting with broader defensive requirements. Some Phrygian nobles attempt to negotiate separate peace agreements with nomadic leaders, offering tribute payments in exchange for protection that rarely materializes. Others concentrate their resources on defending individual strongholds, abandoning surrounding territories to nomadic raiders who systematically strip the countryside of livestock, stored grain, and portable wealth. The fragmentation of Phrygian political authority accelerates as the invasion progresses, with competing claimants to royal succession unable to present unified resistance to nomadic attacks. Archaeological evidence suggests multiple individuals attempt to establish themselves as legitimate heirs to Midas's throne, each controlling limited territories around particular fortified centers. Political fragmentation prevents effective coordination of defensive efforts while creating opportunities for Cimmerian leaders to exploit divisions through selective alliances and targeted attacks against rivals. The siege of Sardis in 652 BC, documented in both archaeological and textual sources, demonstrates the extent of Cimmerian military capabilities and the helplessness of traditional defensive strategies against nomadic warfare. The Lydian capital, protected by massive fortifications and defended by professional soldiers, equipped with the finest available weapons, falls to Cimmerian assault after a siege lasting only a few weeks. The nomads' success results not from superior siege equipment, but from their ability to maintain continuous pressure while disrupting supply lines and preventing relief efforts from reaching the besieged city. The psychological impact of Cimmerian military success extends far beyond the territories they directly attack, creating panic and defensive preparations throughout Anatolia and the eastern Mediterranean region. Greek city-states along the Aegean coast strengthen their fortifications and organize military alliances specifically designed to counter nomadic threats. Assyrian records describe emergency military preparations and diplomatic initiatives aimed at containing Cimmerian expansion before it can threaten Mesopotamian territories. Material culture changes evident in archaeological deposits from this period reflect the broader transformation of Anatolian society under nomadic pressure. Pottery production shifts from decorative luxury items to simple functional vessels suitable for rapid transport and concealment. But the Phrygians don't simply disappear. They survive, adapt, and eventually recover under new masters. The adaptation strategies employed by surviving Phrygian communities reveal both the resourcefulness of local populations and the severity of challenges they face. Some settlements relocate to naturally defensive positions on isolated hilltops or islands, abandoning fertile agricultural areas for locations offering protection from cavalry attacks. Others develop new economic relationships with nomadic groups, providing specialized goods and services in exchange for protection or safe passage through contested territories. The emergence of fortified refugee sites represents one of the most significant adaptive responses to Cimmerian pressure. Archaeological surveys have identified dozens of small fortified positions throughout central Anatolia, constructed or reoccupied during this period, typically located on steep-sided hills or rocky outcrops providing natural defenses against mounted attackers. These sites, often containing evidence of hasty construction using recycled building materials, serve as temporary refuges for rural populations during nomadic raids while maintaining minimal facilities for essential activities like food storage and craft production. The survival of Phrygian cultural traditions during this period of political collapse demonstrates the resilience of social institutions and cultural practices even under extreme stress. Religious sites continue to function despite the destruction of major urban centers, with archaeological evidence indicating continued offerings and ceremonial activities at rock-cut sanctuaries and rural temples throughout the invasion period. The persistence of Cybele worship in particular provides continuity of religious practice, helping maintain community identity and social cohesion among dispersed and traumatized populations. The gradual recovery beginning in the mid-7th century BC occurs through the establishment of new political arrangements, acknowledging the permanent changes wrought by nomadic invasion. Rather than attempting to restore centralized royal authority, surviving Phrygian communities developed decentralized governance systems based on local strongmen controlling limited territories while maintaining loose confederate relationships with neighboring settlements. These arrangements provide sufficient security for economic recovery while avoiding the administrative complexity and resource requirements that had made the unified kingdom vulnerable to nomadic attack. But the Phrygians won't remain independent for long. A new power is rising in western Anatolia, the Lydians, and they're about to bring Phrygian territories under their control. The emergence of Lydian power under the Mermnad dynasty provides the political stability necessary for Phrygian recovery from the devastating Cimmerian invasions. Gyges, founder of the Mermnad line who seizes the Lydian throne around 680 BC, initially focuses on consolidating control over western Anatolia, while the Phrygian heartland remains fragmented and vulnerable. Archaeological evidence from Sardis shows massive construction projects undertaken during Gyges' reign, including expanded fortifications and royal palaces demonstrating Lydian determination to establish permanent dominance over the region's trade networks and agricultural resources. The gradual incorporation of Phrygian territories into the expanding Lydian Empire occurs through a combination of military conquest, diplomatic negotiation, and economic integration spanning nearly a century. Rather than attempting immediate annexation of the entire former Phrygian kingdom, successive Lydian rulers employ flexible strategies adapting to local conditions and varying degrees of resistance encountered in different regions. The process begins with the establishment of Lydian control over key strategic positions along major trade routes, particularly the mountain passes and river crossings, regulating commercial traffic between the Aegean coast and the Anatolian interior. Excavations at Gordion reveal clear evidence of Lydian occupation beginning around 650 BC, marked by distinctive architectural modifications and the introduction of new material culture elements reflecting changing political circumstances. The citadel area, partially rebuilt after Cimmerian destruction, incorporates Lydian construction techniques including the use of carefully dressed stone blocks secured with iron clamps and the adoption of roof tile systems providing better weather protection than traditional Phrygian timber and thatch roofing. The transformation from independent Phrygian kingdoms to provincial status within the Lydian Empire requires fundamental changes in political structure and administrative organization. Local Phrygian nobles who had maintained autonomous control over individual strongholds during the post-Cimmerian recovery period find themselves incorporated into Lydian administrative hierarchies as regional governors and military commanders. This integration process preserves elements of traditional Phrygian leadership while subordinating local authority to centralized Lydian control exercised from Sardis. Archaeological evidence from secondary Phrygian centers shows the implementation of standardized administrative practices characterizing Lydian provincial governance. But the Lydians bring more than just political control. They bring an economic revolution. The Lydian invention of coinage around 650 BC revolutionizes commercial transactions throughout the empire, replacing barter systems and tribute payments with standardized monetary exchanges, facilitating long-distance trade and simplifying tax collection. Archaeological evidence from Gordion includes substantial quantities of early Lydian electrum coins alongside traditional Phrygian trade goods, indicating rapid adoption of monetary systems despite their foreign origins. Imagine the transformation. Instead of negotiating the value of every transaction, merchants can now use standardized coins, making trade faster, more efficient, and more profitable for everyone involved. The development of specialized craft production under Lydian patronage creates new economic opportunities while transforming traditional Phrygian manufacturing techniques. Royal workshops established at major centers produce luxury goods, combining Lydian artistic preferences with Phrygian technical expertise, creating distinctive hybrid styles appealing to diverse markets throughout the Eastern Mediterranean region. Metalwork in particular flourishes under this arrangement, with Phrygian craftsmen adapting their traditional bronzework skills to produce elaborate vessels, jewelry, and decorative objects incorporating Lydian decorative motifs and iconographic programs. Famous Lydian Phrygian bronze vessels discovered at sites throughout Anatolia and the Greek world demonstrate the successful integration of different artistic traditions under imperial patronage. These objects, characterized by sophisticated casting techniques and elaborate decorative programs featuring both Lydian and Phrygian mythological themes, represent collaborative productions drawing upon the best elements of each cultural tradition. Chemical analysis of bronze compositions reveals standardized alloy formulations suggesting centralized quality control and technical training programs operating under royal supervision. Textile production experiences similar transformation under Lydian rule, with traditional Phrygian weaving techniques adapted to produce fabrics meeting imperial court standards while maintaining regional characteristics. Archaeological evidence from production sites includes loom weights, dyeing equipment, and textile fragments demonstrating continued use of traditional Phrygian patterns alongside newly introduced Lydian designs. The combination of local wool supplies with imported luxury materials like silk and fine cotton creates hybrid textile traditions influencing fashion throughout the ancient world. But the cultural synthesis goes deeper than economics and crafts. It transforms religion, art, and identity itself. The cultural syncretism characterizing Lydian-Phrygian interaction extends beyond material culture to encompass religious practices, artistic traditions, and social customs, creating new forms of cultural expression. The Lydian adoption of Cybele worship, facilitated by the goddess's existing popularity throughout Western Anatolia, demonstrates the pragmatic flexibility of imperial religious policies while providing continuity with Phrygian spiritual traditions. Archaeological evidence from temple sites shows the construction of new sanctuaries combining Lydian architectural elements with traditional Phrygian sacred spaces, creating hybrid religious environments serving diverse congregations. The expansion of Cybele's cult throughout the Lydian Empire represents one of the most significant cultural developments of this period. Lydian royal patronage provides resources for temple construction, festival celebrations, and priestly training programs, spreading Phrygian religious traditions far beyond their original geographic boundaries. Archaeological evidence from Sardis includes a major temple complex dedicated to Cybele, incorporating both Lydian and Phrygian architectural elements, serving as a model for similar constructions throughout the empire. The mystery religions associated with Cybele worship gain particular prominence under Lydian rule, attracting initiates from across the social spectrum, including members of the royal family and high-ranking administrators. These secret ceremonies, conducted in underground chambers and sacred groves, create networks of religious fellowship transcending ethnic and regional divisions while reinforcing imperial unity through shared spiritual experiences. Archaeological investigation of mystery cult sites reveals specialized ritual equipment and architectural modifications accommodating the complex ceremonial requirements of initiation processes. The artistic innovations emerging from Lydian-Phrygian cultural interaction influence aesthetic development throughout Anatolia and the broader Eastern Mediterranean region. Sculptural traditions combining Lydian monumentality with Phrygian decorative sensibilities create new forms of architectural ornament and religious imagery appearing in contexts ranging from royal palaces to private tombs. The famous rock-cut facades at Phrygian religious sites show clear evidence of Lydian artistic influence, with geometric patterns and figural representations reflecting cross-cultural artistic exchange. But Lydian rule doesn't last forever. In 546 BC, a new conqueror arrives from the east, Cyrus the Great of Persia, and he's about to absorb the entire Lydian Empire, Phrygia included, into the largest empire the world has ever seen. The conquest of Sardis by Cyrus the Great in 546 BC marks the end of Lydian independence and the beginning of a new chapter in Phrygian history under Persian rule. The rapid collapse of Croesus's kingdom, achieved through a brilliant campaign exploiting Lydian overconfidence and tactical inflexibility, demonstrates the military superiority of the emerging Achaemenid Empire. Persian forces, utilizing superior cavalry tactics and siege techniques developed during their conquests in Central Asia and Mesopotamia, overwhelmed Lydian defenses that had proven adequate against traditional Anatolian enemies, but are unprepared for Persian innovation and mobility. The integration of former Lydian territories, including the Phrygian regions that had been under Lydian control for nearly a century, into the Persian administrative system occurs with remarkable efficiency. Cyrus's policy of cultural tolerance and administrative pragmatism, which had proven successful in Mesopotamia and other conquered territories, extends to Anatolia, where existing governmental structures are adapted rather than replaced. The Persian satrap system, which divides the empire into manageable administrative units governed by appointed officials responsible to the great king, provides a framework for governing diverse populations while maintaining imperial unity and extracting necessary revenues. The establishment of the Lydian satrapy, which encompasses most of western and central Anatolia, including the traditional Phrygian heartland, creates new administrative boundaries reflecting Persian strategic priorities rather than historical ethnic divisions. Archaeological evidence from Sardis shows the rapid implementation of Persian administrative practices, including the construction of new governmental buildings, the establishment of standardized record-keeping systems, and the introduction of Persian legal codes governing commercial transactions and civil disputes, while allowing local customs to continue in matters of family law and religious practice. Phrygian communities throughout central Anatolia find themselves incorporated into this new administrative framework through a process combining Persian efficiency with practical accommodation of local conditions. The Persian administration recognizes the value of maintaining existing social hierarchies and cultural institutions that can facilitate imperial governance while ensuring loyalty to the Achaemenid throne. But Persian rule brings more than just new administrators. It brings Phrygian soldiers into conflicts spanning from Egypt to Greece. The military reorganization accompanying Persian conquest fundamentally alters Phrygian participation in regional defense and imperial expansion. The Persian system of military service, which combines professional units recruited from throughout the empire with local levies raised according to standardized quotas, integrates Phrygian warriors into imperial armies while utilizing their specialized skills and regional knowledge. Phrygian cavalry, renowned for their horsemanship and familiarity with Anatolian terrain, become valuable components of Persian military forces operating throughout the empire's western territories. The recruitment of Phrygian soldiers for Persian campaigns creates new forms of cultural contact and exchange extending far beyond Anatolia. Phrygian units serve in Persian expeditions to Central Asia, Egypt, and eventually Greece, exposing them to diverse military traditions and cultural practices while spreading Phrygian influences throughout the empire. Archaeological evidence from Persian military sites includes weapons and equipment combining Persian standardization with regional variations reflecting the diverse origins of imperial forces. The famous participation of Phrygian troops in Xerxes' invasion of Greece in 480 BC demonstrates both the extent of Persian military integration and the continuing importance of Anatolian forces within imperial strategy. Herodotus's detailed account of the Persian army's composition specifically mentions Phrygian contingents equipped with distinctive weapons and armor, reflecting their regional military traditions adapted to Persian tactical requirements. The historian's description of Phrygian soldiers wearing foxskin caps and carrying small shields and javelins alongside their traditional cavalry equipment provides valuable insight into the material culture of Persian-era Phrygian military service. The economic transformation accompanying Persian rule fundamentally alters Phrygian participation in regional and international trade networks. The Persian policy of promoting commercial activity throughout the empire, supported by standardized coinage, improved transportation infrastructure, and legal protections for merchants, creates unprecedented opportunities for economic expansion. The famous Persian Royal Road, which connects Sardis with the imperial capital at Susa, passes directly through traditional Phrygian territory, bringing increased commercial traffic and associated economic benefits to communities along its route. Imagine caravans stretching for miles, carrying goods from India to the Mediterranean, all passing through Phrygian lands and paying tolls, buying supplies, creating wealth that transforms Phrygian communities once again. Archaeological excavations at road stations and commercial centers throughout the Persian period reveal evidence of expanded trade networks connecting Phrygian producers with markets extending from India to Egypt. The standardization of weights, measures, and coinage throughout the Persian Empire facilitates long-distance commerce while creating demand for luxury goods and specialized products that Phrygian craftsmen are well positioned to supply. Persian administrative records preserved on clay tablets and parchment documents document the scale and complexity of commercial activities flourishing under imperial protection. The continuation and expansion of traditional Phrygian craft specializations under Persian rule demonstrates the empire's pragmatic approach to economic development. Metalwork, which had been a Phrygian strength since the Bronze Age, adapts to Persian market demands while maintaining technical excellence and artistic distinction. The production of bronze vessels, weapons, and decorative objects continues using traditional Phrygian techniques, enhanced by Persian innovations in metallurgy and quality control. Textile production experiences similar expansion under Persian rule, with Phrygian weavers gaining access to new materials and markets through imperial trade networks. The Persian appreciation for luxury textiles, documented in royal inscriptions and artistic representations, creates demand for high-quality fabrics that Phrygian producers are skilled at manufacturing. Archaeological evidence from textile production sites includes new types of looms, dyeing equipment, and imported raw materials enhancing the quality and variety of Phrygian textile output. The religious tolerance characterizing Persian imperial policy allows Phrygian spiritual traditions to continue and even flourish under Achaemenid rule. The Persian recognition of local deities and religious practices, provided they don't conflict with imperial authority or security requirements, creates an environment where traditional Phrygian cults can maintain their activities while adapting to new political circumstances. Archaeological evidence from religious sites throughout central Anatolia shows continued ritual activity and temple maintenance during the Persian period, indicating the vitality of indigenous spiritual traditions. The cult of Cybele experiences particular expansion during Persian rule, with imperial tolerance allowing the goddess's worship to spread throughout the western satrapies and beyond. But in 334 BC, everything changes again when a young Macedonian king crosses the Hellespont with an army and ambitions that will reshape the entire ancient world. The thunderous approach of Alexander's cavalry across the Granicus River in May 334 BC marks the beginning of a new era for the Phrygian territories that had languished under Persian administrative control for over 2 centuries. The Macedonian king's decisive victory over the Persian forces commanded by the satraps of western Anatolia opens the road to Sardis and beyond, setting in motion events that will fundamentally transform Phrygian society through exposure to Greek culture, political institutions, and economic systems. The speed of Alexander's advance through western Anatolia catches Persian administrators unprepared, with many fortified positions surrendering without resistance as news of the Granicus defeat spreads throughout the satrapy. Archaeological evidence from Gordion reveals the immediate impact of Alexander's passage through central Anatolia during his march toward the Cilician Gates. Excavation layers dating to 334 BC contain scattered Persian administrative documents hastily abandoned alongside Greek pottery and coins marking the arrival of Macedonian forces. The transition appears to have occurred without significant violence at Gordion itself, suggesting local populations welcome the change in administration or at least offer no organized resistance to Alexander's advance. And then comes the moment that will echo through history: Alexander's encounter with the Gordian knot. The ancient sources describe Alexander's arrival at Gordion during the winter of 334-333 BC, where he encounters the legendary knot supposedly binding the yoke of the wagon belonging to Gordius, the mythical founder of the Phrygian kingdom. According to tradition, whoever could untie the intricate knot would rule over Asia, a prophecy holding particular significance for a young Macedonian king intent on surpassing the achievements of his predecessors. Various accounts describe how Alexander deals with the Gordian knot. Some say he carefully examines it before discovering how to remove the pin holding the yoke, thus technically fulfilling the prophecy without cutting anything. Others present the more dramatic account of Alexander drawing his sword and slicing through the knot with a single stroke, declaring it makes no difference how the knot is undone. The symbolic importance of the event resonates throughout the Hellenistic period, whether it happened exactly this way or not. But symbols aside, Alexander's conquest brings real, transformative changes to Phrygian society. The practical consequences of Alexander's passage through Phrygia extend far beyond legendary encounters with ancient symbols. The Macedonian administrative system replacing Persian governance introduces Greek-speaking officials, Hellenistic legal procedures, and new forms of urban organization, beginning the systematic transformation of Phrygian society. Archaeological evidence from administrative centers throughout central Anatolia shows the rapid introduction of Greek pottery, coins, and architectural elements marking the beginning of sustained cultural change. The appointment of Antigonus Monophthalmus as satrap of Greater Phrygia in 333 BC establishes the administrative framework through which Hellenistic influence will penetrate traditional Phrygian communities. Antigonus, one of Alexander's most capable generals, possesses both the military experience necessary to maintain order in recently conquered territories and the administrative skills required to integrate diverse populations into the expanding Macedonian system. His long tenure in Phrygia, lasting until his involvement in the succession wars following Alexander's death, provides stability during the crucial transition period from Persian to Hellenistic rule. The military colonies established throughout Phrygian territory during Alexander's reign and the subsequent Hellenistic period create permanent Greek-speaking populations serving as centers for cultural diffusion. These settlements, typically located at strategic positions controlling major roads and river crossings, house Macedonian and Greek veterans alongside their families, creating communities maintaining Hellenic cultural practices while adapting to Anatolian conditions. Archaeological excavations at sites like Dorylaeum and Synada reveal planned settlements with Greek-style public buildings, residential districts organized around courtyards, and religious facilities dedicated to traditional Greek deities. The urban planning principles employed in these military colonies reflect Hellenistic concepts of civic organization emphasizing public spaces, organized street grids, and the integration of residential, commercial, and religious functions within unified urban environments. The contrast with traditional Phrygian settlement patterns, which had focused on defensible hilltop positions with organic growth patterns, demonstrates the systematic nature of Hellenistic cultural transformation. New construction techniques utilizing dressed stone masonry, tile roofing systems, and architectural orders derived from Greek temple design create built environments visually proclaiming the presence of Hellenistic civilization. But Alexander dies young in Babylon in 323 BC, and his empire immediately fractures as his generals fight over the pieces. The death of Alexander in Babylon in 323 BC precipitates the succession wars, determining the political future of Anatolia and the Phrygian territories within it. The initial division of Alexander's empire among his generals assigns Phrygia to Antigonus, but the complex military and diplomatic maneuvering that follows creates decades of instability as various claimants fight for control over the lucrative territories of western and central Anatolia. Archaeological evidence from this period shows signs of military activity and defensive preparations at major centers, indicating the disruptive impact of continued warfare on civilian populations. The Battle of Ipsus in 301 BC, which results in Antigonus's death and the definitive partition of Alexander's empire, brings most Phrygian territories under Seleucid control as part of the vast realm awarded to Seleucus Nicator. The Seleucid Empire, stretching from Syria to the borders of India, represents the largest and most diverse of the Hellenistic kingdoms, requiring sophisticated administrative systems to govern populations speaking dozens of languages and practicing varied cultural traditions. The integration of Phrygian communities into this vast imperial structure creates new opportunities for cultural exchange while maintaining sufficient local autonomy to preserve indigenous traditions. The Seleucid administrative system builds upon the foundations established by Alexander and his immediate successors, while adapting to the specific challenges of governing such extensive and diverse territories. The appointment of Greek and Macedonian officials to key administrative positions ensures loyalty to the Seleucid throne while creating channels for the transmission of Hellenistic culture throughout the empire. However, the practical requirements of governing established communities with deep historical roots necessitate accommodation of local customs, legal traditions, and religious practices that had survived previous periods of foreign rule. Archaeological evidence from Seleucid period sites throughout Phrygia reveals the gradual but systematic transformation of material culture accompanying political integration. Pottery assemblages show the increasing prevalence of Hellenistic forms and decorative styles alongside continued production of traditional Phrygian vessels for local use. The introduction of standardized weights and measures facilitates commercial integration, while Greek coinage gradually replaces local monetary systems, creating unified economic networks connecting Phrygian producers with markets throughout the Seleucid realm. But Seleucid power won't last either. New players are entering the game, and eventually the unstoppable force of Rome will absorb everything. The gradual erosion of Seleucid power during the 2nd century BC creates opportunities for the expansion of Pergamene influence into traditional Phrygian territories. The Attalid dynasty, which had established independent control over northwestern Anatolia during the chaos following the Gallic invasions of the 270s BC, pursues systematic territorial expansion, bringing much of western and central Phrygia under Pergamene administration. The transfer of allegiance from Seleucid to Pergamene authority occurs gradually through a combination of military pressure, diplomatic negotiation, and economic inducement, reflecting the pragmatic approach characteristic of Hellenistic interstate relations. The Pergamene administrative system differs significantly from Seleucid practices in its emphasis on direct control and systematic cultural integration. The Attalid kings, ruling over a much smaller territory than their Seleucid rivals, can afford to invest greater resources in urban development, educational institutions, and cultural programs promoting Hellenistic civilization while accommodating regional traditions. Archaeological evidence from Pergamene period sites shows increased construction activity, improved infrastructure, and expanded public facilities, enhancing the quality of urban life throughout their territories. The famous library at Pergamon, which rivals the great collection at Alexandria in its scope and scholarly resources, attracts intellectuals from throughout the Hellenistic world and creates an environment of learning influencing cultural development throughout Anatolia. The scholarly activities conducted at Pergamon include historical research, literary criticism, and scientific investigation, preserving and transmitting knowledge from diverse cultural traditions. Phrygian historical traditions, religious practices, and artistic techniques become subjects of systematic study that both preserve indigenous culture and transform it through scholarly interpretation. The artistic patronage of the Attalid kings creates new forms of cultural expression, combining Pergamene court aesthetics with regional traditions from throughout their territories. The famous sculptural programs at Pergamon, including the Great Altar of Zeus with its dramatic depictions of the battle between gods and giants, establish artistic standards influencing monument construction throughout the kingdom. But in 133 BC, something unprecedented happens. The last Attalid king dies without heirs and bequeaths his entire kingdom to Rome. Just like that, the Phrygians find themselves subjects of the Roman Republic. The bequest of the kingdom of Pergamon to Rome by Attalus III in 133 BC transforms the political landscape of western Anatolia overnight, bringing Phrygian territories under direct Roman administration for the first time in their long history. The childless king's unexpected testamentary disposition, which grants his entire realm to the Roman people, reflects both the internal weaknesses plaguing the Attalid dynasty and the inexorable expansion of Roman power throughout the eastern Mediterranean. The Senate dispatches Marcus Perperna with 5 legions to take possession of the Pergamene territories, establishing the administrative framework that will govern the new province of Asia. The Roman approach differs markedly from previous Hellenistic administrative systems in its emphasis on systematic resource extraction and direct imperial control, though practical considerations necessitate accommodation of existing local institutions and cultural practices that had proven effective under Pergamene rule. The integration of Phrygian communities into the Roman provincial system occurs through the establishment of conventional administrative units balancing imperial control with local autonomy. The Romans recognize existing city-states and tribal organizations as civitates, granting them internal self-governance while subjecting them to provincial taxation and military obligations. And this arrangement preserves traditional leadership structures and cultural institutions while ensuring effective extraction of resources necessary to support Roman military operations and administrative expenses throughout the eastern provinces. Archaeological evidence from major Phrygian centers reveals the rapid introduction of Roman material culture alongside continued production of traditional local goods. Pottery assemblages from sites like Gordion and Pessinus show increasing quantities of Roman-style ceramics, including terra sigillata vessels imported from Italian workshops and local imitations produced by Phrygian potters adapting to new market demands. The Roman municipal system, adapted from Italian urban governance models, provides the institutional framework through which Phrygian communities can participate in provincial administration while maintaining their distinct cultural identities. The construction of Roman-style public buildings in Phrygian cities demonstrates both the material benefits of imperial integration and the cultural expectations accompanying provincial status. Basilicas, forums, and bath complexes, built according to standardized Roman architectural principles, create urban environments proclaiming imperial civilization while serving practical functions for local populations. But Roman rule brings more than just buildings and taxes. It brings new religions that will ultimately transform Phrygian identity more profoundly than any previous conquest. The gradual introduction of Christianity into Phrygian communities during the 1st and 2nd centuries AD creates new forms of religious expression competing with traditional cults while adapting to local cultural conditions. The Apostle Paul's missionary activities in cities like Antioch and Iconium established Christian communities, maintaining connections with Jerusalem and other early Christian centers, while developing distinctive theological and liturgical traditions. Archaeological evidence for early Christian presence includes modified domestic buildings used for worship, Christian symbols incorporated into traditional decorative programs, and burial practices reflecting Christian beliefs alongside continued adherence to local customs. But Christianity in Phrygia takes a unique turn in the 160s AD with the emergence of the Montanist movement under the prophetic leadership of Montanus and his female associates Prisca and Maximilla. This charismatic movement, centered in the village of Pepusa, proclaims the imminent arrival of the New Jerusalem while emphasizing prophetic revelation, ascetic practices, and the spiritual authority of women in religious leadership roles. Theological innovations that challenge orthodox Christian authority structures while drawing upon traditional Phrygian religious concepts, including ecstatic prophecy and direct communication with supernatural powers. The movement's appeal to rural populations reflects both its accommodation of traditional spiritual practices and its critique of urban Christian institutions that seem remote from local cultural concerns. Though eventually condemned by church councils and imperial edicts, Montanist beliefs persist well into the 6th century, maintaining Phrygian distinctiveness within the Christian world. The final transformation of Phrygian identity occurs during the massive demographic upheavals accompanying the Turkic migrations of the 11th and 12th centuries. The Seljuk victory at Manzikert in 1071 opened central Anatolia to systematic Turkish settlement, bringing pastoral nomads whose cultural practices and Islamic faith fundamentally alter the religious and ethnic composition of territories that had maintained recognizable Phrygian characteristics for nearly 2 millennia. The process involves substantial population replacement through immigration, conversion, and intermarriage, creating entirely new social formations. Yet elements of Phrygian cultural heritage persist in folk traditions, agricultural techniques, place names, and, most spectacularly, in the massive tumulus burials and rock-cut monuments that survive as landscape features, inspiring archaeological rediscovery beginning in the 18th century. Modern excavations at Gordion, particularly Rodney Young's discovery of the famous tomb MMM in the 1950s with its extraordinary preservation of Bronze Age craftsmanship, have revealed the sophistication of this ancient civilization. From Bronze Age migrants to medieval absorption, the Phrygians created distinctive cultural expressions that enriched the ancient world, their story exemplifying how cultures adapt, transform, and contribute to broader historical developments across 3,000 years. Subscribe to Colossus of Empires for more ancient histories that shaped our world.